Hi, this is the Philosophical Angle program, and I'm your host, Chris Angle. The purpose of the Philosophical Angle program is to define concepts in current media. I'm the author of 4 books on philosophy, one of which is The Nature of Aesthetics, and they're free for viewing at www.philosophypublishing.com. They're also available free upon request if you go to the website and respond to the email address there. Along with me is my panelist, colleague, and co-host, Rick Samuelson. Good to see you, Rick.
Good to see you.
Rick graduated from Yale and Wharton and is a venture capitalist on the West Coast. This week we're going to discuss, the topic is going to be, was the Obama administration good for America over these last 8 years? So in looking at the last 8 years, one kind of wonders whether the Obama administration was good for America. But before we try to answer that question, I think we need to discuss what is the nature of that which is good. After all, we're trying to decide what is good for America, and derivatively, was the Obama presidency good for America? Well, let's start by saying that good is that which brings us up away from misery. So the Obama administration brought us up away from misery is really the question that we have to ask today. And well, I think we can say here, we can say yes, because the gross domestic product has improved for 8 years, albeit at a very slow rate, but nevertheless it has improved. However, others might argue that the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, has been a total disaster for the nation because of its costs. And costs on health insurance policy, as has been widely reported in the media, has skyrocketed. Also, the deductibles on health insurance policies individual policies also have skyrocketed as well as corporate policies, making the entire situation much more expensive for the American public and its companies. But a liberal Democrat might argue that even though the cost is going up, the benefits of the Obamacare policy is much better for America because it has brought those who didn't have health insurance under the Obama aegis, and that it's bringing to the country an overall greater benefit. And I think that they would argue that bringing those who don't have health insurance to having health insurance is priceless. And for the moral fabric of the nation, it is obviously far, far better thing that we do than we have ever done before, to paraphrase a little bit of Charles Dickens. So after making more of a betterment or discovering a new betterment, there's also the consideration of the introduction of efficiencies into the betterments, and to explain, in our decisions we gather all knowledge and information concerning any subject. We have our time and our effort amidst an atmosphere of risk when making a decision. And predominantly, we bring forth new knowledge and information to make our effort less. We decrease the amount of time for our product or our service, and we try to decrease the risk in making the product and service, or in doing any action that we desire in making our decision. It doesn't even have to be a product or a service. It can be socially, and when we deal with our family or in any other decision that we make. And so in essence, the reward to our decision making and the means to the desideratum that we desire it becomes less. So there's no clear resolution yet into whether the Obama presidency through the Obamacare Act is better for America. Both sides have their arguments, and they are legitimate. So you got to ask ourselves, well, where do we go from here? Well, we have to go into the definition of good and add another dimension to it. we have to bring or integrate good into that which is better. So let's do that. So better is the additional good over the previous good. That is, over time, the amount of goodness increases, but still, the same arguments on both sides reside with us yet. One side says that the costs to society are ever increasing, and the other side might say that in the first place, GDP still remains positive, and in the second place, as previously mentioned, people who are uninsured become covered, and society as a whole will become insured, and thus the overall goodness remains positive. So it looks like we need actually a third parameter or dimension, and the third dimension of goodness is efficiency. The first, efficiency, as another dimension in understanding the betterment produced by the Obama administration over the last 8 years, we can clearly say that many of his policy decisions, such as implementation of Obamacare, increasing the debt through the corrupt spending bill of 2009, brought great inefficiency to the U.S. economy and the U.S. social fabric. Including this dimension, or using this dimension, Obama's decisions have been terrible. Nevertheless, the opposition in the Democratic Party would argue that although it is or may be inefficient, again, it brings many poor people greater comfort in having health insurance, and thus is a greater comfort and benefit to society as a whole. It brings pride to society as a whole, knowing that we are providing the much more indigent among us with better health coverage, as Europe does. So really, the argument is not yet destroyed. So where do we go now to be able to formulate an answer as to whether society is better off with the decisions of the Democrats in the last 8 years or not? Well, in life's decision-making process, betterment has another dimension, actually another 2 dimensions. And so we're going to add the next dimension of a decision-making process is ethics. And ethics is the consideration of making all of our decisions because we want to be moral and not immoral. We want to be right and just and righteous in making the best decision. Without righteousness, our decisions are unjustified. So ethics is an appropriate dispensation of respect, and we respect others because we consider them important in our lives. We consider them important for what they produce, and in producing things and services, and we need cooperation. And cooperation is effectuated by respect. And so ethics is keenly important to the advancement of any society because it promotes the cooperation by which people are able to produce goods and services and get along with each other. And our laws and regulations are made to mirror our ethical considerations, and our considerations are to effectuate cooperation throughout all levels of society. And so for the indigent in our society, we feel that we owe them a certain degree of cooperation in which we need to help their situation so that at least they can live their lives at a minimum level. So ethics now has to be introduced as an additional dimension and added parameter. And it's important because it governs the ability of the human species to cooperate. So let's review this concept just briefly. Again, we say that ethics is the appropriate dispensation of respect, and we respect others when we consider them important in our lives, and that's when we respect our parents for they brought us into the world and cared for us and cooperated through their lives, bringing betterment into our lives, or our life, really. We respect the president of corporations because the corporations produce a lot of goods and services, and employees at those corporations cooperate together to produce goods and services and bring in the potential of goodness to those who buy their products and services. We respect others when we consider that important, and they are important when we need to cooperate with them in order to produce something, and we produce things and services in order to bring us up away from misery, which is the nature of all that is good. The aspect of respect evolved within the human species in order to allow us to cooperate to produce these goods and services. And ethics and its respect allows us to become moral, as morality is good because it generates behavior that is productive in our betterment as individuals and to our human society. So I think it's always important in our decision when we're involved with others is to use ethics. The last parameter in decision making is the aesthetics of the situation. And aesthetics is the pinnacle of that which evolution has produced in both in the animate and inanimate world. That is, beauty is that furthest point which evolution has produced within life. It is also the beauty that is found in the inanimate physical universe that supports the evolution of life that evolution has produced. That physical evolution has produced. And an example of this would be when you look up into the sky and see the Milky Way and see how beautiful it is. We do this because it represents the vastness of the universe, and its existence allows us to live and be a part of it. The universe supports us, allows us to live, and which, judging from its vastness and its complexities, it takes a lot for to have happened for us to live within the universe. So so back to Earth here. Our aesthetic sense influences our more final decisions, and naturally we gravitate toward that which we determine to be beautiful, and our aesthetic sense provides that. So in the case of the Democratic administration's performance in the last 8 years, we have to consider whether society has advanced and cooperated in a better fashion than previously, and whether the American society is gravitating toward an evolutionary, more positive society to satisfy our aesthetic sense. And in this case, I don't think it has. We see greater disharmony in the last 8 years in all aspects of our society, and so in this, the Democratic left has failed us, and aesthetically, it has failed this portion of the test of decision making. So overall, the Democratic administration of Barack Obama has failed in 2 aspects: aesthetically and efficiency-wise. And efficiency is part of the aesthetic sense and the aesthetic whole. So, what do you think, Rick? Has the Obama administration failed us, or has the Democratic Party been good for America over the last 8 years? What do you think?
Well, leaving aside the intentions of the Obama administration, let me start by considering what have been the most important effects of that administration. And first of all, I would cite the growth in the national debt. So the national debt has effectively doubled, approaching $20 trillion in 8 years. we were fortunate in having a very low interest rate environment, which is partially manipulated by the Fed. But this is going to be with us for many years to come. And it's going to be, as and when interest rates normalize, this will become a very important obstacle to private investment, or at least an issue that has to be dealt with. Secondly, the effects of the administration in the Middle East have been calamitous. Whether you chalk it up to failing to commit to the red line in Syria, or withdrawing troops early in Iraq, the Middle East is literally exploding. The United States is no longer an important actor. It is being directly excluded from any kind of peace negotiations in Syria by the likes of Russia, Iran, and Turkey. The Iranians appear to, through very clever negotiations surrounding the nuclear treaty, completely outfoxed us, and now have the money to continue and actually increase their terror operations abroad, while we have no guarantee that a nuclear weapon won't be created in the not too distant future, measured in years, not decades. In terms of family income, you might rightly say that GDP has grown steadily, more or less steadily. There have been negative periods, negative quarters for the last 8 years, but family income has not. It declined for several years. It started to recover, but we're basically not far off where we started in 2008. Productivity has grown in fits and starts, and in the absence of productivity growth, it's very, very difficult to achieve any kind of growth in family income. Meanwhile, the costs of certain items, particularly healthcare, my healthcare, and I'm now talking about out-of-pocket costs, not manipulated numbers, which get very complicated when you talk about deductibles and insurance premiums and so on and so forth. My out-of-pocket costs, real money, those costs have increased 50% since Obama was elected. This from a government that tells me there's essentially no inflation. All right, so you could make the argument that the government lies systematically on these and other matters. Unemployment is a similar issue. Unemployment is at 5% if you don't count the several millions of persons that have left the workforce, which is an absurdity. If you were to measure unemployment the way it was measured in the 1930s by the federal government, unemployment would be north of 10%. So again, there's a lot of fiddling with numbers that it's done in the name of political expediency. But when you look at the hard, cold facts in terms of how people actually live, I would say the improvements have been sparse at best. Let's turn now to education. Universities have increased their tuitions pretty much steadily throughout the Obama administration. School debt, that is debt taken out by students to afford their educations, continues to skyrocket. It's well over $1 trillion, as well publicized in the newspapers. The number of students, if you include all universities, community colleges, and higher education outside of high school, the number of students during the Obama administration has declined by almost 1 million. Now let's think about that. Let's talk about that in the context of social justice. So, and the population's grown. So the number of students was north of 20 million several years ago. And now it's down just over 19 million. And why is that? Why is that? It's not that there are fewer students. It's because of the cost. The cost has continued to rise. People can't afford it. And so there are fewer students getting an education. This from an administration that claims that the way to prosperity is through advanced education for as many people as possible. But this is actually what has happened. So, in terms of the social, what I think is the most important social, quote unquote, social justice issue, the Obama administration's been a complete failure. It has the educational opportunity, the effective educational opportunity for Americans has declined. It's actually declined, not increased. It hasn't even remained flat. So to me, that's one of the most damning statistics that can be levied at the Obama administration, given what their stated priorities were. And let's consider for a moment what wasn't done. What wasn't done is tax reform. That was willfully ignored. You'll remember there was an Erskine-Bowles commission early on in the administration, which had a set of recommendations. Perhaps they weren't perfect, but they were a reasonable, bipartisan set of recommendations for rationalizing the ludicrous U.S. tax code, which is unbelievably complex, the most complex in the world. That was willfully ignored. What has happened in the wake of that? Well, corporate investment has been minimal over the course of his administration. It's been extremely depressed. What have companies done instead? They've bought back shares. Right? They've issued debt and they've bought back shares.
Yep.
What does that do? It gooses their earnings per share. What does that do in the stock market? It raises the share price. Right. Other things equal. All right, other things equal. Not always, but other things equal. So instead of focusing on the investment that is a precondition for growing sustainable jobs and welfare for the masses, if you will, and I'm not speaking of welfare that takes the form of government subsidies. I'm speaking of the broader traditional concept. The administration has been an enormous obstacle to promoting the kind of private sector investment that is needed to achieve that. So here we are, and it's no wonder, in the absence of vigorous corporate investment, private sector investment, that worker productivity has gone almost nowhere over the last 8 years. It's increased marginally, if at all. And without that, how are you going to achieve higher family incomes? It simply can't be done. And now 8 years have been lost. And so there's going to be a catch-up period required. And in the meantime, if we point to elements of this coalition, well, let's consider minorities. Are minorities generally economically better off than they were when he started out?
I think we have to, we're going to need part 2 of this because we're running short on time here for this episode. And so next week, I think we can talk about a couple of points that you mentioned. One is you were talking about whether about American foreign policy, and so it's probably a good idea to discuss whether it's good for America to have a presence in the Middle East and have it be part of its foreign policy. And your second point that was so interesting was the why possibly the educational figures statistics are actually decreasing over the last 8 years. So that's an important topic too. So we're going to visit these in the next installment of the Philosophical Angle program. So everybody, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in the next installment. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.